Tammy, go for it.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. This is different this year, but we're actually thinking this may be wonderful because we can record this and people all over the world basically can watch Miranda. It really is my pleasure to introduce you to Miranda. Miranda is an outstanding student majoring in biopsychology. I'm going to talk a little bit about her athletic background because that actually matters for her presentation. She is a pitcher and she's on the McKendree softball team, and she is a home run hitter. Just last week, she had a 3-run home run, and she has had 4 home runs this season. And I feel like she's due for another 2 this weekend. So no pressure, Miranda, but she is a home run hitter. The Bearcats softball team is having an amazing year this year, and I'm rooting for them. And I'm even rooting for them that they actually will miss graduation because they'll be off playing. So congrats to the McKendree softball team this year and to Miranda for her years on our team. But let's talk a little bit about her presentation. You will notice that her presentation has a few photos of some of this very same softball team because she's talking about sports. And she's talking really about how COVID has impacted sports, especially last season, and what that has meant for the team. She's going to be using her softball experience, her biopsychology major, and this research as she is headed off to occupational therapy graduate school next year. And I'm very engaged with the occupational therapy graduate program. And I want you to realize how competitive it is to actually get into these graduate programs. And Miranda applied to 8 occupational therapy graduate programs, and she got accepted into 7 out of those 8 graduate programs. I don't know even what that 1 out of 8 was thinking to not accept her, but let's really, I wish her well. She will be headed off to the University of Wisconsin La Crosse Masters in Occupational Therapy graduate program. So all of her experiences will serve her well. I'm just so pleased that I had the opportunity to work with Miranda throughout the years and then on this honors project. Her research is entitled Athlete Shutdown, Experiencing COVID-19 and Season-Ending Injuries. I will ask that most of you should hide your cameras because that, we believe, helps with the streaming. So that way Miranda can talk to just me and a bunch of black boxes. So I will stay so that I can continue to nod. So Miranda, it really is my pleasure to introduce you and let you share a little bit of your honors senior project. Take it away, Miranda.
All right, I'll go ahead and screen share my PowerPoint. All right, so my name is Miranda, like I was introduced, and my project that I've been working on all year is Athlete Shutdown, Experiencing COVID-19 and Season-Ending Injuries. So just a little introduction. My research study assessed athletes' reactions and perceptions to the COVID-19 shutdowns. And then I compared these experiences that the athletes had to known perceptions to injuries from current literature that is already out there. Kind of just compared all of their perceptions, all their reactions, their own experiences to how other athletes have experienced an injury. So then the COVID-19 pandemic was assessed using self-reported measures and interview questions to just gain knowledge about what athletes experienced from a wide range of reactions. We got a lot of athletes to answer our surveys to want to participate. And knowingly, there were a lot of reactions. There weren't many similar ones. So my hypotheses included that athletes would experience an increase in anxiety, fears, and depressive levels from the COVID-19 pandemic shutting down their seasons, similar to how athletes experience injuries. And then also, I hypothesized that athletes would experience a change in their sleeping habits, weight fluctuations, fitness levels, motivations, mentalities, goals, and planability. So not only just with their sport, but they would actually experience some rollover into their regular life, psychologically, physically, in every capacity. And then also I hypothesized that all athletes losing their ability to participate in their sport, no matter the reason, would have a similar range of reactions. So for my literature review, I focused a lot on current literature that is known about athletes experiencing injuries because there is a lot out there on it. So it is known that social support is a major determinant during the rehabilitation process. And this is difficult because the athlete naturally becomes secluded during the process of rehabbing from their injury. Obviously, they can still show up to practices, they can still be on the sideline, but they are on the sideline. They're not able to compete. And as athletes, most of us know that we play because we want to compete. We want to be out there when it matters, when the clock's ticking. So that's a very difficult thing for athletes to have to experience. And so that supportive environment does aid athletes through their internal conflicts, but again, it's tricky because they aren't able to fully participate in everything. So then just keeping athletes involved with their team, goal setting, effective communication, and effective motivation are deemed the most important psychosocial aspects of being injured. So no matter what you can do, something is better than nothing with keeping your athletes involved. And then here I have some pictures of my teammates. This one on the top, she had an ACL injury when she was in high school. She's still playing. She's currently on the team. And then the bottom picture is me in my sling after I had shoulder surgery just under 2 years ago. So a lot of good comparisons that we were able to get from the study. So continuing with the literature review, responses to injury include stress, anxiety, anger, and treatment adherence issues, which is also difficult because adherence to the treatments and keeping a positive outlook are best for coping. So even though it's a natural reaction to be stressed out, to have anxiety, to have anger towards being injured, and then you bring all that into your treatment, it's really not good for coping. So it's a very tricky balance there. So again, this top picture is a current teammate. She just had shoulder surgery about 3.5 months ago. And then the bottom picture is the girl who had an ACL injury. She had shoulder surgery at the same time I did, about just under 2 years ago. So athletes do struggle with athletic identity after injury, along with feeling helpless and guilt immediately following their onset of injury, which also makes it hard because athletes with low athletic identity before they get hurt have been found to have a more difficult time adjusting to not being able to compete. So already all athletes experience that athletic identity crisis almost. Plus, if you had low athletic identity, you're more likely to struggle even more. So then it's also very well known that athletes can have a wide range of psychological responses to injury, whether you have the same injury, you have the same exact surgery, you have the same exact rehab. Everyone experiences the injury different. They have different reactions, different perceptions to being injured. So it's difficult to say that everyone should be on the same track. And then not only that, but mental toughness, hardiness, and optimism can vary throughout the recovery process for one single individual. So not only is it different person to person, but it's different along your rehab process. And then also confidence tends to increase and negative emotions decrease as rehabilitation continues after the onset of injury. And again, I have a teammate here. She had foot surgery 3 years ago, I'm pretty sure. It might be 2.5. So then moving on to more of the COVID pandemic, there's not a lot of current research out there right now, obviously probably still in the process because athletes are still experiencing dealing with the pandemic. So it has been proposed that the pandemic could be a traumatic stressor, which has the ability to create PTSD-like symptoms in individuals, which can enhance other mental health problems, including anxiety, depression, psychosocial functioning. So similar to an injury, it already automatically creates a natural psychological response to it, plus then having to deal with athletics. So college students in particular have experienced perceived stress from workload, separation from school, and fears of infection, which lead to negative influences on their health. So not only is it with athletics, but you're also dealing with the athlete, their own health, their own lives outside of their sports. And then this is a picture of the softball team's first trip this year back in March, having to follow all of the COVID guidelines while still being able to compete. So the methods for my research included interviews and self-reported measures of student athletes, exactly 41 student athletes at a small Midwestern university. It included just over 58% female and just over 41% male, all from different sports, a very wide range of sports. And then the level of post-secondary education included just over 14% of both sophomores, juniors, 21% freshmen, and then just over 48% senior plus. So that includes grad student, fifth year, sixth year, whatever that may be. So the methods for the self-reported measures included answers from on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being not at all, 5 being extremely. It just included questions regarding anxieties of returning to play, whether you stayed in contact with your teammates, any fears associated with restarting seasons, any changes in anxiety levels, depressive levels, trouble sleeping, noticeable weight loss, weight gain, all due to the pandemic and your season being canceled. And then whether the pandemic changed physical fitness levels, whether you think your playing ability would benefit from the time off. And at the time, because it was a while ago that we did the research, whether the athlete was concerned with the possibility of their season being canceled again. So the open-ended questions, more of an interview type question where the athlete could respond with anything they wanted to, included questions regarding motivations, whether they changed or not, how they changed, whether mentalities changed, whether their career goals changed athletically, whether they would be in the same spot physically and mentally that they ended last season in, what are some strategies they developed to maintain a positive outlook in the situation that they were in. And then the last question really was able to compare to injuries. I actually asked whether they had a previous season-ending injury or sidelining injury, and then if yes, how that experience compared to having a season end due to COVID, and then if not, how they thought it would be compared to an injury. So the results, there were slight changes in fears associated with restarting their season, depressive levels, trouble sleeping, and a slight change in their athletic ability from the time off, and then moderate changes in they had increased anxiety, noticeable weight loss, weight gain, and a change in physical fitness levels. So common responses for the interview questions included a lot of athletes said they had a decreased motivation from their season being canceled just because they didn't know when their season would restart, what would happen with that season, whether it would look the same or look different. Their sport just not seeming to be a priority once season got canceled. They were more focused on their health, on their family, on anything else that was going on, making sure that their schoolwork was still being kept up with because it did end in the middle of the last semester last year. And then also just a decreased motivation from facilities not being available. So they didn't have weight rooms, they didn't have everything that they would have while being on campus. Also, a lot of athletes answered that they had a negative mentality during the pandemic because they had less motivation, more stress, more depression levels, and then just the uncertainty regarding everything around COVID. However, athletes did answer that they felt they had a greater mental strength from dealing with COVID, although they were less physically prepared. So they felt that they were able to accomplish more because they've been through some bad things already. And then also to keep a positive mindset, a lot of athletes said that they were communicating with friends and family and focusing on the controllables. So the COVID pandemic was not controllable, but how they responded to it was. And then a lot of athletes who had also experienced an injury did note that the injuries are very isolating because you're the only one out. You're the only one sidelined. Yes, you can go to team practices, but you're the only one not competing when the clock's ticking, when everyone else is on the field. And then with COVID, the teams all experienced being sidelined together. Every teammate went through it at the same time. Everyone experienced the same message saying your season was canceled. And then everyone experienced it starting back up all together. So then some common responses for athletes that haven't been injured included that they felt it was different for COVID because they had to be told they couldn't play when they physically could. So that was hard for them to stomach, for them to process, because they knew that they could go out there and play, but because of the situation the world was in, they couldn't. So for the discussion, there were many similarities between athletes losing the ability to compete, whether it was with the pandemic or with injuries. The initial reactions of having that stress, that anger, the anxieties towards whether you would be able to play, when you would be able to play, were all similar between injuries and the season shutdown from the pandemic. And then also there was a very large similarity because there were wide ranges of emotions and perceptions regarding both the COVID pandemic and injuries. Looking through all 41 responses from athletes, there wasn't one athlete that responded similarly on every question. Similar to injuries, everyone experiences the same injury in different ways. And then also just the decreased motivation from the pandemic and from injury. And then also the positive mindsets and communications with teammates did improve both situations, whether it's from an injury, whether it's from the pandemic. A lot of athletes noted that they stayed in pretty close contact with their teammates, although virtually, they were still able to talk about other things, talk about what they're going through, everything like that. However, there were many differences between the athletes losing their ability to compete, just because the injuries are very isolating. You're the only one, you have to watch everyone play. And it also seemed as if recovery plans to injuries, although they don't seem very concrete, because obviously we all know that rehabbing is dependent on many factors. And even if you're told 6 months rehab, it could be 9, it could be 3. But even with that considered, they still seem more concrete than what we went through with the pandemic, because it changed week to week. At least with a rehab plan, you're probably looking within within a certain time frame of being able to play again. But with the pandemic, 1 week, it seemed like we could have a season, and the next week it was like, how are we going to have a season? And then just a conclusion, any athlete experiencing a loss in participation should stay connected with teammates, because they are able to feel a sense of community. They're able to increase their motivations. Everyone can do it together. Everyone can get through it together. So whether it's an injury or whether it's a pandemic, hopefully it never happens again, but we all can kind of relate to them, even for future injuries. More teammates will be able to see that, like, it's hard to sit out, it's hard to not be able to do what you want to do. And then also just that clear communication does improve mindsets, no matter what it is, between teammate, coach, school coach, institution coach, whatever you're playing for, that communication is able to help athletes have a more positive mindset. And then I just have my references. All right, so I'll stop sharing. Are there any questions?